Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the TV Exiles. This week we'll be looking at the penultimate episode, episode 11, of the final season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. This one titled Shattered. As usual, joining me for this review is fellow Star Wars enthusiast Brandon.
Hey, how's it going?
All good, all good. Right, let's get into this. So, just like last week, it hops right back into where we left off in episode 10. Maul is being escorted in a Mandalorian chamber built for Jedi initially. How was this moment for you, and how did Ahsoka and Bo-Katan's farewell work for us as the audience, do you think?
I thought the scene worked really well. I mean, obviously you have Maul being wheeled out like Hannibal Lecter, like a wild animal. And
exactly.
I really like that they didn't just fall back on carbonite and just freeze him. They came up with the concept of a chamber from when the Jedi and the Mandalorians were sworn enemies, and they had these specifically built for Force wielders.
Yeah.
And I mean, the ornate design and everything on it was just really cool looking. But again, the idea that this was from an era in the past when they were at war, but her exchange with Bo-Katan says this is the last one.
Yeah.
Because it's signaling that there's peace in the future.
Somehow I don't believe that that's the last one.
Yeah, it's just my intuition says, one, that's not the last one, and two, this isn't the time for peace.
Exactly.
But I do love that the scene played out as if they don't know what's coming, and they plan on seeing each other in the future.
Yeah, it was a subtle farewell. It wasn't as built up as the one that we saw between Ahsoka and Anakin in the first episode.
Yeah, even then, that was, a them being reunited after so long. It was a great, farewell, but see you later. Mm-hmm. It was a touching moment between those two, but it wasn't so much as a goodbye still like a series finale normally would. This isn't Lord of the Rings where every character comes together to say goodbye after all these events. These characters don't get that because they don't know.
They don't know that's the goodbye. Exactly. And obviously we know that Ahsoka and Bo-Katan eventually are going to be together, right? Yeah, so later in Rebels they will come together again, and that will be pretty nice. And it was right next to Bo-Katan was Sabine Wren's mom from Rebels, and it was really cool to see her in the Clone Wars animation. And they didn't need to name drop Sabine for fan reaction or anything like that. You just knew, and you knew that later on that she would be part of this universe even more. And yeah,
those are the kinds of nods that are nice.
Yeah, and the writers of the Clone Wars obviously know that Star Wars fans would know this anyway. Like, they know that the Star Wars fans are meticulous in this kind of thing. So Ahsoka is called to report to the Jedi Council, and we're greeted with a familiar scene. How did the exchange fit into the episode, and how did the exchange after further our knowledge from Revenge of the Sith?
I mean, ultimately, this scene was another marker for us, which we've had multiple times, to let us know where we are in Revenge of the Sith.
Which they've done a brilliant job in, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, they haven't really retreaded. This is the first time that we've actually gotten a direct scene from Revenge of the Sith, redone in animation with the current voice actors. But again, it's just a very, very nice piece of storytelling, so they don't really have to retread known ground. It just tells us exactly where we are, what moments we are at, and then becomes an extension of the scene. So now when you go watch Revenge of the Sith, you'll know that right after the scene cuts, that Ahsoka was actually walking up to that podium. Obviously, in a real world perspective, that wasn't intended originally, but that's the really clever way of adding to a series is just having that little hint of what was actually going to happen now without ever retconning anything or changing anything.
Yeah, I think the scene is perfectly fine. What we want to get out of it as fans is great. Like, we get to see the bit of fan service, we get to get that interaction between the Jedi right there, tying it in with Revenge of the Sith. Perfect, brilliant. I kind of have a storytelling issue with it. Like, I don't think that Ahsoka was there for any particular real reason other than a pat on the back and a well done, chief kind of thing. But if you discount that, I think everything else we got from the scene was pretty good. Like, we get to see how Ahsoka is still defending or protecting Anakin from the Council, not mentioning that Maul was talking about him, and also her being still withdrawn from the Jedi. Although I did find it touching that Yoda still had that element of regret from not believing her in the arc from season 5 where she left, and by calling her Padawan at the end, I think that was his hopes that she would return as a Jedi, and I still feel like he felt a bit of regret there and is upset about that, which is really touching, which is really good writing.
Yeah, I was going to say it's pretty touching that, you know, you get an element of this, that she thinks that she could come back to the Jedi, and that, you know, especially Yoda, but that the Jedi Council wants her back. But then you can see Mace Windu kind of feels betrayed that she says she's not yet, which, you know, leads to, again, one of the problems in how we've always raised the Jedi up to be these ultimate, you know, almost godlike figures that can do no wrong, is in the end, in this turn point moment of the entire galaxy, you know, these two people are both keeping information from each other.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, that's part of what led to this path and made it so easy for Sidious to overtake all this, was the trust was no longer there between the Jedi, between the people, between planets and galaxies. The trust was no longer there. I mean, Sidious was part of that undoing, was building that distrust, but ultimately, just in this one scene, if those two would have been honest with each other, maybe there would have been time to stop it. Unlikely, but maybe there could have been just a couple extra moments to stop what was coming.
That little extra knowledge for Mace maybe would have stopped him from turning his back on Anakin and having that little delay, which enabled Sidious to take advantage. So the next thing we see is Ahsoka on a Republic destroyer. How do you feel the changes in the Republic destroyer indicate that we are entering a new era in the galaxy? How did the change in the style feel to you in terms of the overall storytelling of Star Wars?
It's something that's been happening for a few seasons now. The end of season 5, especially with, you know, the Wrong Jedi arc, and a little bits in season 6, you start to see the world move towards that industrial design of the Empire. Everything is flat, everything is militaristic. The prison cells now look like they did in A New Hope. The walls look the same, but on the Star Destroyers, well, they're not Star Destroyers yet, but they're the Republic Destroyers. The command decks are below where the actual commanders stand, so to raise the kind of the level of fear. So everybody who's actually working is below the people. And that's a design out of the original trilogy, and something that's changed throughout the show as they've moved towards becoming an empire as opposed to a republic. And I just think it's a really cool way to visually change that, and not just all of a sudden one day just boom, it's different.
Yeah. Well, then they jump to Lightspeed, and Ahsoka and Rex are having like a really heartfelt conversation. They both salute each other, and then Rex is called away for a command update. Before we get into what happened after, how did the initial conversation between the two make you feel?
Well, as we've mentioned many times in our reviews, what the show has done so well is give life to the clones.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea that the Jedi weren't built to be soldiers, they were meant to keep peace, but she was born into war, essentially.
Yeah.
She's always been part of a war, and Rex is also, he understands that, obviously war is bad and he wants it to be over, but at the same time, if the war didn't exist, then the clones wouldn't exist. Yeah. So, you get to this wonderful moment of, something great coming out of something bad. Yeah. Whether it be friendship or just life in general, is these characters are not droids, they're not robots, they're not empty shells, they've all become people.
Yeah, and I think that this interaction puts a button on how strong their friendship was. And without that, everything that comes following from Rex specifically wouldn't have made sense. We needed that final reminder that these two aren't just colleagues, they aren't just commander and soldier, they aren't both just commanders, they're friends. And it's that friendship which gives Rex that pause, that ability to mention fives, which allows the story to progress. So without this interaction, I believe those who are not as engrossed in the history of Clone Wars as we are might not have got why Rex delayed in the way that he did. And I think it just worked tremendously.
It did. And obviously, yeah, that leads to, like you said, what happens next.
So what are your feelings on what happened next?
Well, I thought it was brilliant that, and I know I've said that many times, just one, I mean, obviously seeing him standing there for Order 66, but the way that he paused when the doors opened and shook a little bit and dropped his helmet, like he was having a major internal conflict. Yeah. Like his programming was being overwritten, which, I mean, he's not a program, he's a person, and he's trying to fight this. And, the question was always, was his chip already out or was it in? And then now we know for a fact he didn't take it out yet. And it gives you this question of, why was he able to pause that long and all the others turned instantly?
So we saw one of the most iconic lines from all of science fiction, execute Order 66. And just like in Revenge of the Sith, the clones were pretty much okay with it. No fighting back, which kind of contrasts with the arc with Fives, where there was some kind of glitch and resistance, which always left me the question of, did the clones know about Order 66 and they just accept it, which was the vibe that I got from Revenge of the Sith? Or is it something that completely overrides them, something that they aren't aware of but completely overtakes them, which was the kind of feeling that I got from the original arc with Fives? This episode does a magnificent thing in terms of marrying the two and blending them in a way that, no, it is something that overrides them, but in a way that tells us that they aren't able to resist it. It's only the closeness Rex has with Ahsoka and the knowledge he has from Fives which causes that resistance. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think originally when episode 3 came out, it was just another one of their orders.
Yeah.
Was just in case, they just follow the Chancellor's order. He is the supreme commander of it all.
Yeah.
And they just followed the order.
But they called him Lord Sidious.
But in this, they called him Lord Sidious. And I think that's what's one of the things, especially in season 6 and now season 7, that they made a point of, is that after building that relationship over all these seasons with the Jedi, that they wouldn't just blindly follow this order instantly. Like they would have to see proof because these are their friends.
Exactly.
They would not just turn on Obi-Wan. They wouldn't just turn on Ahsoka. So the chip was necessary at this point to combat, and it makes sense.
And it also raises the question as to if Rex was able to resist that little bit, not completely, but just a tiny little bit with Ahsoka. Does that mean his relationship with Ahsoka was so strong in comparison to Cody's with Obi-Wan, for example, who didn't show any signs of resistance?
It's, you know, it's quite possible. You wonder if there's multiple reasons. One is they obviously have a much closer bond, almost, you know, older brother, little sister, especially later in the episode when he calls her kid, things like that. Is they do have a very close relationship that goes deeper than just basic friends.
Yeah.
So that could have given pause. The idea that Rex knew about the chip and about the order because of what Fives told him, even on a subconscious level, he was expecting this. Maybe not at that moment, but at some point, and maybe that gave him just enough time to know what was happening to stop himself. But obviously he started shooting. Yeah. So ultimately could not stop himself. But yeah, I think there's multiple reasons on why he was able to just give that small pause. Yeah. And again, I loved that he just stood there shaking and dropped his helmet as his realization of what was happening.
Yeah, I also like how Ahsoka fought off the blaster lasers. That was just brilliant, just smooth, buttery smooth VFX, lovely. I loved every single microsecond of it. But then she escapes completely and goes to free Maul. How was that whole scene played out for you? Were you happy with it? Did it fit what you would expect?
Yes, I mean there was a ton of emotion. I can't even say that, you know, my eyes didn't well up a little bit as the music really started to hit, because you did get some of that Anakin music in it where, I mean, they started to feel that betrayal, but the scene was gorgeously put together, and it shows, you know, Ahsoka's smarts as she was deflecting all the blaster rounds to the ceiling to create a hole for her to escape. I thought that was great, and they thought they had got her, and as the smoke clears, she's gone. I again, just as a whole, that scene just worked really, really, really well. And then obviously we get the command for the clones to go and kill Maul as well. And as far as the interaction with Maul, it was unexpected how it happened. Obviously you expected that at some point he was going to be freed because he's in Rebels, so we know he's still alive. But I was not expecting the way Ahsoka handled herself. You had kind of expected a team up, and that's not what happened at all. She was like, I don't care about you. You're a distraction. You're a wild animal just trying to get them off of my tail. Like, that's all I care about.
Yeah, I almost thought that when he asked for the lightsaber that she would have given him one, because of the fact that when we see her again in the future, she doesn't have her blue lightsabers. She has white lightsabers in Rebels. But obviously those of us who may have read the book, we know that she actually leaves her lightsabers intentionally. So yeah, makes sense, keeping canon tip top and tight. The writers did a brilliant job, and yeah, I actually love the fact that she said to him, like, nah, I don't care if you die, I just want you to make a distraction for me. and that was pretty cool. That was pretty, keeping in line with the fact that this guy has been a thorn in their side for how many years throughout the Clone Wars. So top notch.
Yeah, it was really very entertaining in the way that, she said it to him, because she'd obviously just captured him and been through so much. But that led us to another scene, and I mean, essentially what's a scene in the vein of Rogue One with Vader's hallway scene, mowing through some clone troopers.
Absolutely.
For Disney, this was kind of violent. People were getting stapled to the walls, heads were getting removed, and then he's dragging people through doors to get their limbs chopped off. I was like, wow, I'm kind of surprised Disney went here.
Yeah, and you can see why Sidious went there as well with Anakin, because, those actions were very similar to what you would expect from Anakin, from obviously Rogue One, as you mentioned. So, no, brilliant.
Yeah, really, really well done. It was nice, even without the lightsaber, because we've never really seen Maul use just the Force. He's always had his lightsaber. So having this and just pure use of the Force and just mowing through was just awesome.
And obviously, another tie-in to Rogue One is Ahsoka's use of the mantra, "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me," and repeating that mantra when she finally gets a hold of Rex and they attempt to remove the chip. Firstly, how do you feel they portrayed the discovery and then the ultimate removal of the chip, the tension of that scene, but also how they use that mantra to tie in with Rebels? What does all that mean for you?
Well, I mean, the idea that the chip was organic and was very difficult to locate was nice. It wasn't just as simple as finding it.
Yeah, it lines up with the original arc with Fives in season 6, where Tup fired upon and killed the Jedi Tiplar, and then obviously Fives accompanied Tup to Camino and did all the tests. It was really hard to find the chips initially in that arc as well. So again, brilliantly tying up the canon of the Clone Wars and Star Wars in general.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's tying back to what we have known before. Is those were hard to find. So finding that chip using the Force again was a smart way of just continuing to put their faith in the Force. But the line, "I am one with the Force and the Force is with me," was a very nice nod to Rogue One, which of all the new era, the Disney Star Wars films, Rogue One is probably my favorite.
Same for me.
And I really liked Chirrut Inway, and his scene where he was chanting the "I am one with the Force and the Force is with me" as he was searching for something that he couldn't see, as the Force led him to it. Was a really great moment. And whether that that means that he was not a Jedi, he was a guardian of the will, which they're technically in a way Force users, but not necessarily Jedi. It does tie them to the Jedi, and they were an ally of the Jedi. And whether this was a known phrase or did Ahsoka introduce it? I don't know if she introduced it, but she knew it.
Yeah, I mean, there's serious questions to ask here on this point, because if this is the first time that the phrase is mentioned, which chronologically, to our knowledge, I believe it is, does that mean that she introduces it to the rebellion? Because we know that she is an integral part of the rebellion. And she did have prior interaction in the Clone Wars series with Saw Gerrera, who we do see in Rogue One. But also, does it indicate to us that she started the rebellion?
She, as far as part of the book, she is an integral part in starting the rebellion. She was part of Fulcrum. She joined up with Bail Organa to essentially start the rebellion. So in a way, this could be somewhat of a hint to that. I think this was more about a peaceful moment in passing the Force from her into Rex. But yes, I mean, ultimately, to your question, she is part of that.
Yeah, definitely. And so in terms of how the scene played out, the suspense of it, how did it feel to you in terms of its culmination?
Well, considering that we know both of those characters survive, I still think the suspense played very, very well with all the other clones trying to get in to kill her. And especially, you know, as she starts getting overwhelmed and gets shot and drops one of her sabers, and for Rex to wake up just in time, and save her so they could close the door and seal it back shut. I thought that the suspense was great, and again, you know, not just showing that she's this all powerful, that she was about to lose, and she was doing so to try to save her friend. I thought was a great moment.
Yeah, I think it's cool that they had that little shot of Rex lifting his guns, because I honestly, when I first saw it, I thought, oh no, is she going to be able to deflect that as well? Is this how like maybe she gets injured or something? But nah, he shot the other clones. He was all fixed up by the removal of the chip, and then we see something or someone trying to get through the door. Who are your guesses as to who or what that might be?
I mean, it could be something as simple as just the clones still trying to come through the door, and we've just got to figure out a way with these characters to get them out of there.
My initial guess was it could be Maul, but I don't know how he would open it, because there was like some sparks and stuff, right?
Yeah, it really wasn't he doesn't have a lightsaber, and it wasn't really a lightsaber cut, so
maybe
he
with
would
the
have
Force,
to have had.
And that was a resistance, maybe, but maybe that's a bit of a stretch.
My initial thought was, you know, it could be somebody there to rescue them, Mandalorians or Saw Gerrera, but last we knew they were still at light speed, so unless they're adding more things Last Jedi style to the universe, I don't think that...
Stop it. The power of the Force compels you.
Yeah. So unless the technology has changed, it's very likely that it's probably just the clones. But again, we don't know if the ship's dropped out of light speed.
Yeah.
That would be something that would be easy to just state in the next episode. But we're left wondering.
Yeah, and I think it's a great cliffhanger to leave us on. And you know what? I completely expect us to pick up right where we left off, just like we did in the last couple of episodes. So May the 4th. We'll be ready for it.
Yeah. Special shout out before we end this, though. I recently just watched all 3 episodes back to back, and one thing I do have to state is the score throughout this entire arc is phenomenal. It's foreboding. It's dark. When we know where this is going, it's very atmospheric. It's got vibes of Blade Runner 2049 in it. It's really got some just really insane moments that are they're almost making you feel the dread of what's happening, even though you already know. It's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. Good shout. And definitely leaves me with great anticipation for next week. How do you feel about the 3 episodes in general in terms of the story arc? Have they left you fulfilled so far, and how amped are you for the final episode?
I don't know if words can really express. This is the most excited I've been for Star Wars. As I actually stated, I think in our first episode review, it was I was so excited for this to be back, and I didn't get that feeling watching the first 2 arcs of this season. I was kind of let down. I was enjoying it, but I was let down. But 3 episodes in, and this was the feeling I expected to have, and ultimately it is all worth it. And pending final episode, this could be my favorite Star Wars movie. It's it's hard. You've got to overcome Empire Strikes Back and obviously a few other fantastic ones, but this arc has just been borderline flawless. In its presentation, in its storytelling. I couldn't ask for more, and I don't want it to end, but I can't wait for it to end so I can maybe cry a little.
Yeah. As far as my perspective, this is exactly what I wanted to see. It's the culmination of almost a decade of fandom. For me, Clone Wars, I've said it so many times, it's the best thing we've got from Star Wars outside of the original trilogy. And honestly, it's a shame for me that it's ending. I'm quite upset that it's ending. I want more like this, and viewers and listeners will know from the length of our reviews that as the season has gone on, they've got longer and longer and longer, and that's because we've had more and more to say. And this final arc has been nothing short of stunning, stupendous, all the superlatives you can think of. And on the one hand, I can't wait for the final episode, and on the other, I wish it wasn't the final episode. I hope that those in charge of Star Wars can see how much we truly love this series, and they will give us more. And I hope this isn't the end.
Same. I hope they find ways to pick up and tell additional stories, even if it's, not part of an overall arc, just little bits here and there. But, if this is where it truly does end and they don't decide to add anything else, this is going out on about the highest note you could possibly imagine.
Definitely. I completely agree. And we're going to talk about the arc as a whole, the season as a whole, the series as a whole in our next episode. And until then, where can the good people find you, Brandon, and talk about this unbelievable, this brilliant arc of Star Wars Clone Wars with you?
You can find me on Twitter at @the_meatball_84.
Brilliant. And you can find me on Twitter as well at Vinaldo7. Thank you for being here with us again to talk about Star Wars, the Clone Wars. Thank you for being a member of our community. If you enjoy our videos, if you enjoy our reviews, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Join us next time to talk about the final episode of Clone Wars. And until then, stay exiled.